All right, good morning. So like I said, I was going to send out a copy of was going to record the live lesson from yesterday and get that out to you guys just so that you would have a copy of it, add in any extra details that I would cover, if we were in a normal live lesson class. So I will get started with that now. This week, what we're going to be learning about is we're going to be learning about Earth systems. That means like our geographical systems, things like our atmosphere and different things like that. And also some of the systems that control like how we obtain nutrition and different things like that, different minerals, carbon dioxide, different things like that. So let's get started. So our targets today are going to be that at the end of this, you should be able to identify the Earth's systems and predict when they are active and which ones are being involved depending on what's happening in the environment. The second one is being able to understand and organize organisms through their energy and trophic levels. And then lastly, be able to discuss and classify biogeochemical cycles, be that being the nitrogen cycle, carbon dioxide, et cetera, and their involvement and their involved elements. All right, so an overview of our Earth systems. We're going to focus on our four systems here. So we're going to focus on the atmosphere, the biosphere, the hydrosphere, and the geosphere. So you can think about what you think those might mean. The atmosphere, we hear that one all the time, so that one should be really easy for you to understand. It'll be the other three that we'll kind of decipher here today. So starting with the atmosphere is like the air really up high that surrounds the Earth. There's four different layers in the atmosphere. So you have the troposphere, the stratosphere, the mesosphere, and then the thermosphere. And it reaches up over 350 miles from the surface of the Earth. So if you think of driving 350 miles from your location, I know that from my house here in around Grand Rapids, it's a little over 100 miles to Flint. So you do that 3.5 times. You drive there 3.5 times, or there and back, and then there again, plus a little bit back to Lansing, I guess. And that's how far up it would be above the surface of the Earth. The atmosphere consists of about 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, and then there's other components within the atmosphere, but they're in very, very small amounts. Next, we have the biosphere, or what we like to call the life zone. Okay, so this is like the living part of Earth, the grass, the trees, all that kind of stuff where we actually live. This is going to be the biosphere. All living organisms, including us humans, and any organic matter. Remember that organic matter must contain carbon. Okay, and that has not decomposed yet. This is where we focus on the food chain and also how we get energy and nutrients like carbon, again, are transferred from one level to the next in the food chain. We will focus on that later today. Our next sphere is going to be the hydrosphere. Hydro, you guys probably know, means water. So this is going to be where there's any water on Earth. Okay, so this could be our surface water that is like that we can see, our rivers, our creeks, our lakes, different things like that. It could be groundwater, any of the water inside of the ground that's in our soil or just trapped down there in reservoirs. Any water vapor that we have in the atmosphere, also frozen water that we have here in our glaciers and our ice caps. We also call that the cryosphere. You guys will need to know that later. So frozen water is going to be the cryosphere. And then just remember that only about 3% of the water on Earth is fresh water, and then about 75% of the fresh water on Earth is frozen, okay, into a liquid form. So just keep that in mind. Not a ton of fresh water going around. We just need to be conservative. And lastly, we have the geosphere. So the geosphere is going to be the very solid part of the Earth from the core to the surface. So like not where we're living, but like the internal Earth, like inside of the actual Earth, where you can dig for minerals and different things like that. We're also going to include in there, this is where volcanoes come from, the different rocks and minerals that you can dig for, coal, oil, and like I said, minerals are sourced here. All right, so for this assignment, when you guys go into this, what you're going to do is you're going to, let me see if I can pull this open. Yeah, there we go. You'll have pictures on the side there. You will drag and drop those pictures based on the sphere that you think they match. So obviously the cryosphere is the frozen water. You'll drag frozen water over there. The atmosphere is way up high. Anything that looks like air, you'll drag the atmosphere over to there. So make sure you complete that as you go along. All right, now let's talk about system interaction for a minute, okay? So all of these spheres have to work together for Earth to function properly, okay? So yes, Earth to function properly. An example of this would be a scientist studies global warming, and that means that he has to focus on all of the different systems to see how they work. Obviously, you know, the atmosphere might have a hole in it in the ozone layer. How is that going to affect the cryosphere where there's frozen water, different things like that. So some of these are affected in different ways, and so we just want to go through a couple of examples here. So one example is going to be a volcano. So when the volcano erupts, that starts with the geosphere, right? Because we know volcanoes are in the geosphere. It's then going to send up ash and gases into the air, and then those ash and lava are also going to go to the land and surrounding forests. So where from the geosphere is the volcano then affecting? The geosphere comes from the geosphere, and then it also affects the atmosphere because it goes up into the air and all that, those particles and chemicals get up there. And then also it affects the biosphere as well. And potentially the hydrosphere, depending on what gets into the water. So for the next couple of slides here, you guys have examples here. So you're now asked for a hurricane. So it says a hurricane sweeps across the ocean and onto land, damaging the dwellings of people who live on the coast. You know that it first comes from the atmosphere. Then you have to pick the 3 spheres that it's going to affect from the atmosphere. For your next one here, it talks about an earthquake. So it says earthquakes can damage buildings, which may kill people, as well as cause fires, which release gases into the air. Earthquakes in the ocean may cause a tsunami, which eventually hit land and kill both animals and people. All right, so for this one, I need you to tell me all 4. So which sphere is it affecting first? And then from there, which spheres are affected because of it? Okay, so how is it interacting with the other spheres? Notice they're all connected all the time. All right, now moving on to ecosystems, okay? So an ecosystem is all of the living organisms and also any abiotic or non-living things within an area. We talked a little bit about this last week, okay? Ecosystems can be really, really big, okay? We focus on like the tundra is an ecosystem in itself, or they can be really, really small. It could literally be like a puddle in your yard and you focus on the bacteria and, you know, any like worms or anything else that got in there, the different dirt, soil, etc. Ecosystems are very dynamic, meaning that their energy flow and chemical changes are happening all of the time. There are 2 physical laws that govern or kind of control ecosystems. The one being conservation of energy, also known as the first law of thermodynamics. This is where energy comes in from solar radiation, the sun. Okay, so the sun comes in, and then the plants use it, obviously, and then we eat the plants, and so that's how is that energy conserved. We'll talk about food pyramids here in a minute. Okay. Also, some of that energy from the sun is lost as heat. So we need to make sure we know how that happens as well. You also have conservation of matter. So this is in terms of our chemical elements that are constantly being recycled within the ecosystem. Okay, so you think about, you have a living organism who's made mostly of carbon, okay? And when they die and start to decompose, what happens to that cycling of matter? What happens to the nitrogen? Think about for plants. Those are all things that we're going to cover today. Okay. Things to remember, we've gone over this before, but autotrophs are the organisms that make energy or make food for themselves, right? Okay, so they use photosynthesis or chemosynthesis as a source of energy, and then heterotrophs have to get their energy from somewhere else. So they have to eat or consume another organism to get their energy. Here's a nice like circular pattern to kind of show you what an energy flow system looks like. So the sun comes in, it goes to the primary producers, and they make themselves plants, they grow. Then the primary consumers, these will be things like bunnies and different things like that that only eat plants. Any of our herbivores will come in and eat the primary producers. The secondary and tertiary consumers will then eat the primary consumers. So a bear or a lion or something like that. Even humans, right? Humans will eat because like the cows eat the grass and then we eat the cows, right? Would be a secondary or tertiary consumer. Okay. Notice this red thing that's coming off here is labeled as heat. At each level, some heat is lost for each of the different trophic levels here. And we'll get to like a more kind of like stacked pyramid so you can kind of see. But this is a great example. And notice that it's a cycle. Okay. So this is the energy is going. When the primary consumer dies, it starts to decompose, and then it'll go back to the primary producer. And it just keeps going in a circle and in a circle and in a circle. So on this right here, you have a bunch of pictures off to the side. I wonder if I can pull this one up. Yeah, there we go. You have a bunch of pictures off to the side there. You need to create a food chain path, right? So the sun's going to come in, it's going to go pick a primary producer that it's going to affect, then pick a primary consumer, and then tertiary and secondary consumers. It can go to multiple different things. Notice they say that this eagle dies and comes into a mushroom. Yours doesn't have to look exactly like this. It can be different. Just make sure you're putting the arrows in and then the images in the right corresponding spots. All right, now we get into biomass and kind of how that works in the ecosystem. So we have net primary production, which is the amount of new biomass that is added in any given time period, okay? So the only NPP is available to consumers, okay? So plants don't have, they don't bring in any new biomass. This is only available to consumers that are going to eat it, okay? This is limited by the amount of light, nutrients, and other abiotic factors that are out there. Secondary is the amount of chemical energy in the food converted to new biomass, okay? So first you're focused on like what's coming from the sun, and then you focus secondary on the chemical energy. Production efficiency. Okay, so we have here, it says, when a caterpillar feeds on a leaf, only about 1/6 of the leaf energy is used for secondary production. That means that an organism's productivity level or efficiency is a fraction of the energy that is stored in the food, okay? And so we see that all the time. So as much as we take in all of this energy, we take in all of these calories, only so much of that is actually used within our body. Some of it is lost as heat, like we said earlier, as we are taking it in. So some of that energy is lost as heat. Some of that energy is just lost as waste products. Our body just physically can't digest it, and so it just has to be lost as waste products. And this happens for all consumers. Here's a great example of the caterpillar again. So the caterpillar eats, and it shows you that some of it's going to go off as, so it consumed 200 joules of energy. 100 of the joules are going to go off as feces. 67% of it is going to go off as cellular respiration. Heat is also involved in cellular respiration. Okay, so that's the full digestive process, right? So the digestive process is going to cause heat to go off and then also lose some of that energy that the plant or that the caterpillar took in from the plant. And then lastly, only 33% of it is going to be new biomass, meaning that the animal is then going to grow from it or be able to use that energy. Now we're at trophic levels and then ecology pyramids, like I said. So trophic efficiency, meaning like the transfer of energy from one level to the next, going from producer to consumer to secondary consumer to tertiary consumer, is very, very small. You typically, it's going to range between 5 and 20%, but typically you're only going to get about 10% of the energy is going to be transferred from one organism to the next. It's a very, very small amount. And you will see that this is why at the very top of the pyramid where the tertiary consumers are, there aren't a ton of tertiary consumers out there. The pyramid wouldn't be able to handle that. If you only have 10% of the energy going up and up and up at each different level, there's no energy up there for a tertiary consumer to consume. So it says approximately 0.1% of chemical energy is fixed by photosynthesis actually reaches the tertiary consumer. Okay, just keep that in mind. See how much you're losing every time. It's truly insane. All right, now moving on to biochemical cycles. Okay, so these are going to be our different gas cycles that we're concerned about. So you've got carbon, how the oxygen moves, sulfur, and nitrogen. And these are going to, how are they moving within the atmosphere and then also within the biosphere, because a lot of them move down here on Earth. Okay, some of them are less mobile than other, including phosphorus, potassium, and calcium. They don't move very well. They don't transfer to the air at all. And so we have to focus on them down here in the biosphere. These elements circle locally in terrestrial systems, but more broadly when they're dissolved in aquatic systems. So when they move to the hydrosphere, it's easier to transport those items. Okay. The carbon cycle, one of the cycles that we focus on here. So carbon-based organic molecules are essential to all organisms. We are made out of carbon, okay? So it's very essential for us to know about this cycle. Photosynthetic organisms, plants, convert CO2, we know this, into organic molecules that are used then by or consumed by heterotrophs, okay? There are carbon reservoirs out there that include fossil fuels. It's in the soil, it's also in sediment, and then plant and animal biomass. So just us being out there, we are like a big bucket of carbon. CO2, carbon dioxide, takes up and is released through photosynthesis and respiration. Don't forget also about volcanoes, and they burn the burning of fossil fuels. Okay, so when we burn coal and different things like that, can also attribute to adding more carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. Okay, so that's where, so the carbon reservoirs are where carbon is going to be down here on Earth in the biosphere and in the geosphere. And then you also have it where it can be released into the atmosphere. And here is just a quick example of what the carbon cycle looks like, okay? So you have the carbon in the air, the plants take it in from photosynthesis, and then we eat the plants, so there's a transfer there. Also, we produce, through cellular respiration, we release carbon back out, and so that goes back into the atmosphere. Decomposition is part of the cycle of carbon. Remember, when we break down, where is all that carbon going to go? It's going to go down into, it's going to decompose and then get into the water, evaporate into the atmosphere. So just, again, a cyclical pattern. And here is just another example of it, right? Okay, so atmospheric CO2 goes into photosynthesis. We eat the plants, that's biomass. Then it starts to decompose. The decomposers through cellular respiration or also just getting into the water, and then it is released back into the atmosphere. Next that we want to focus on is nitrogen cycle. The nitrogen cycle is one of your assignments this week, so just make sure you have an understanding of this. This is composed of amino acids, proteins, and nucleic acids. The main reservoir of nitrogen is in the atmosphere, though the nitrogen must be converted to Na4H or NO3 minus to be taken up by plants. Nitrogen via nitrogen fixed bacteria. Okay, so you have these nitrogen fixed bacteria that are on the roots of plants, and that's how plants are able to take up nitrogen. It is essential for plants to take up nitrogen for them to grow properly. Not too much, not too little, but for them to grow properly, they do need the correct amount of nitrogen. So this is what the nitrogen cycle looks like. Again, you have this one that kind of shows here. Again, we saw earlier when we were looking at percentages of the atmosphere, 78% of our Earth has nitrogen in the atmosphere. So there's a lot of nitrogen floating out there, okay? But so you have nitrogen up here in the atmosphere. It will then, it comes down here and it can be fixed in the roots, and then plants use it. And obviously, animals eat the plants, okay? It can also come through ammonification and then nitrification as well, and then be taken up by the amino acids of mushrooms and other decomposers to also go back to the plants. Next, you have the phosphorus cycle. Okay, so the phosphorus cycle is a major constituent of nucleic acids, phospholipids, and then ATP. Okay, so phosphate is one of the most important inorganic molecules that is formed from phosphorus. It is some of the largest reservoirs of phosphorus are in sedimentary rocks, in marine life or the oceans, and in other organisms. Phosphate also binds with soil particles, and that's often how it's moved. So when soil moves or when water flows by soil, that's how the phosphorus is moved from point A to point B. Okay, so this is where you're going to see runoff and how it can. So you have phosphorus here in the rocks. Like we said, it's bound to most soils. Then the rain comes, there's runoff, it goes into the water, the plants take up the water, and that's how the plants get the phosphorus. Obviously, animals eat the plants, consume them, they decompose. Once they're decomposing, they're going back into the sediment. It's just a whole cycle all over again. You have a quick quiz here. I think there's three questions on that quiz that you guys will answer. And then you're to your targets again. So again, targets, I still don't get it. I understand some of it, but not all of it. I understand most of it, but I want to keep learning, and I'm an expert now. Okay, so that is what you have. That's your material for this week. I wanted to just quick sum this up for you. And you guys can tackle that as you go. And then you just have a couple of assignments. Please reach out if you have any questions at all, and I would be glad to help you.